Hey everyone, Travis Gafford here at the TFT Paris Open. For a while I was calling it the TFT Open, but I now know that it's preferably referred to as Paris Open. Why? Does the branding of TFT Open actually exist, or is it always like the city?
Always the city. We like to make it so that everyone is associated with the place.
So then what if I was just like, where's next year's TFT Paris Open equivalent? Because you can't say, if you can't say TFT Open.
Well, when's the next Open? Yeah, okay. I mean, you can say Open.
Okay, so you can't say, but you can't say TFT Open.
You don't refer to an Open by its location, like TFT Open and then its location.
Okay, so it's not TFT Open Paris, it's TFT Paris Open.
Yeah.
But you're always supposed to say TFT Paris Open if you're referring to the event.
Yeah.
I'm here with Riot Sherman, who runs TFT and Riftbound and 2XKO and is that it right now?
That's it.
Okay. And he runs all the esports side of it. Can we also, do you call yourself head of TFT, 2XKO, and Riftbound Esports, or competitive? Because only one of those games, I think, calls himself an esport.
Well, I mean, actually, I refer to my team as the TFT and Emerging Esports team.
Okay.
So we're focused primarily on TFT Esports.
Yes.
And then we kind of help Riot figure out how to build competitive scenes for their new titles.
Okay. So is Riftbound an emerging esport?
I would consider a game that's been out for just about 2 months in the emerging category.
Well, I'm just saying, like, no other TCG refers to themselves as an esport.
Sure.
So it's interesting that Riot's referring to it as
You know, I don't think that we use the esports department because we have a lot of the expertise, whether that's event production, competitive ops, broadcast, but like, that doesn't mean that it has to be a video game.
Okay. What about 2XKO? The FGC hates the term esport. I know this from my time running Yahoo Esports.
Sure.
So do you refer to 2XKO as an emerging esport?
I think that we refer to, we do use the word esports sometimes when talking about it, but it's really, in general, my philosophy when it comes to talking about your scene and your community is esports is a catch-all that you can use, but you can actually, most of the time, be way more specific in a way that just shows a deeper understanding of the community you're talking to.
Very good answer. All right, and that's the interview. Thank you. No, all right, so I am really excited to be here in Paris. I'm taking a sabbatical from my sabbatical to come do some coverage here. And one of the things I want to talk to you about was this event. We're also going to be talking a little bit about Riftbound Houston, because that just happened. That's called the regional qualifier, right?
Yes, regional qualifier Houston.
And what does that qualify you for?
The regional championship.
Which happens?
In next year.
Okay, there we go. For those that are confused about what Houston was. So we're going to be talking about these two things. People can use the timestamps if I don't forget to put them in to navigate to where that is. If I do forget to put them in, then just scan and then listen. But let's start a little bit with this event. So first off, I missed Macau last year, but this is the third year you're doing it. I was in Vegas 2 years ago, and this has grown a lot from when it was in the back rooms of Mandalay Bay. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is as we shout over the voice of this man?
Yeah, I think a lot of it...
We can pause.
A big piece of it for us was back in Vegas. This was our first time putting it together, and honestly, back in Vegas, we were like, we just need to get the tournament itself off the ground, and we did. It was great, but we also knew that there was a big opportunity to bring in a lot more of the community, and that was shown by the panels were packed, people were showing up in lab coat. 20 players showed up in lab coats together to kind of show up as a team, and we just realized that the competition is awesome, but how do we continue to invest in the community element? So the following year in Macau, we brought everything into more of a convention hall instead of a bigger conference center, and that was our first sort of experiment. We had Riftbound as a booth where you could play games of Riftbound. You could go get all these photos. There was a panel stage, and I would say we learned a lot. Some things were hard. Day one last year was went until 2 in the morning.
Okay.
So as we continued to scale, we realized we needed to really buckle down on how we were going to continue to execute. This year is sort of the culmination of all of those learnings. So you have a main stage that is showing all sorts of content and game shows all throughout the weekend. You have the tournament going on that's bigger than ever. and we ran day one only 6 minutes behind. Then you've got places like this, the Patisserie, which is based on the arena skin that's available in game right now for players. You've got Riftbound and 2XKO here. You've got an artist alley. Got all sorts of community activations. One of my favorite changes is the co-streaming stations. They actually all have audio now, so you don't just go and see your favorite co-streamer talking to a camera and then you have to pull them up on Twitch.
Yeah.
You can actually sit down and like watch an entire day.
They have like
from
a
your
mini
favorite
stage
streamer.
almost. Yeah. That is really cool. I have to ask, like, is there not tension in the fact that this is a TFT event and yet you're doing so many other things here? Like, it feels like in some ways this event is starting to kind of like push the limits of what could be a TFT event and start to become more like a Riot Games and emerging esports event, you know?
So, I mean, I definitely, we like to think about this event as TFT Con.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it has to be exclusively TFT. We wanted to bring in things that could help be attractions for people to do throughout the day, but the core of it is still TFT. And so a lot of the activations are really built around what are we hearing from players who are attending. I can point to just about every activation here on site and say how the last 2 years have pointed us to people want more of this or want to engage with more of this.
Yeah.
Carousel Chaos was a great learning for us last year where we did this show match that was crazy, had all sorts of stuff in it that like the players had never seen before, and like on social and online people really loved it. There was lots of cool conversation. People were going back and like VOD reviewing all the crazy things that were happening in it, and we were like, well, what if we could have elements of that all through the weekend and have all sorts of different community programming. We had these panels that people loved on site, but nobody has to see anything of online. And so we were like, okay, how do we integrate that into the broadcast? So we've really been responding to a lot of what players have we feel have told us they want more of, and trying to build around that.
So why not get to the point in time where the TFT Paris Open or Las Vegas Open, as you announced next year is coming back to Las Vegas, why not make that a feature of a broader event at some point in time where this becomes like League of Legends Con or Riot Con or one of these things where you're able to bring in like League of Legends, because it'd be fun to see somebody doing a show around like the off season that's happening right now.
Sure.
You know, Valorant could be doing some sort of fun show match thing.
Yeah.
Like for me, a lot of this captures the early days of the All-Stars events that I used to cover in League of Legends, where it does feel like a fun end of the year thing. You could do an award show. A lot of people have talked about doing esports award shows. I know they happen in certain parts of the world already. So like for me, I look at this show and it's really cool to see how far it's grown, but I'm fascinated at the potential of what it could be if you let it grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think we think that it's nice that every game has its sort of like big moment and like has a time where it can really showcase what's going on, and that the time for that moment is going to be different for every game. So I think we want to avoid ending up in a situation where like, okay, we're going to do this time and everybody bend to that, as opposed to you have an amazing champions built and the entire Valorant calendar is built around champions. And so like why make them move a big moment or have another big moment?
Well, I just mean like they don't need to do like their big moments. You don't need World Finals here, but you could have a cool thing.
It's really nice that TFT has its own big moment, really celebrating the launch of our brand new set, 100 champions, and just like kind of a cool new way to showcase TFT. And I think that from my perspective, some of that might get lost, or you might like reprioritize some of the things you do if it's not really centered around a single game.
Yeah, that's fair. I rewatched some of the interview that I did with you 2 years ago in Vegas when you first did this. One of the things that I know we talked about at the time was show matches, or not show matches, side events for people, because you and I both know each other for a long time, and we both attend a lot of TCG events, even before Riftbound was a thing. And side events are such a huge thing. People come in and they're like, well, I'm watching these competitors on stage, but I want to go participate in that.
Yeah.
I am pleased to see you have, I believe, a lot more side events than you did in Vegas.
Yeah.
But it is still pretty limited compared to, I think, some of the aspirations you alluded to in that interview a couple years ago. So has the position changed a little bit on creating an opportunity for other people to come in and play like zany side events, or has there been less demand, or where are you kind of at on that 2 years later?
No, I think that we still have the same aspiration. I think that we've been really focused on getting our tournament execution to a good spot. I think Macau had a lot of challenges for us And so a lot of this year was really focused on let's refine the operation of the main event. We brought in a new 4v4 second chance tournament this year. That is a pretty sizable tournament. I think we ended up with 256 players playing in it today. And as we kind of get sharper, we think that it will reopen the ability for us to have other side events. Managing PCs, managing venue times, managing all these elements, you have to be really sharp.
Yeah.
And know that you're actually able to deliver the experiences you want to build. And so I would say in one sense, we've rebuilt our competition capability this year with a lot of new tooling that, after Paris unlocks us to think about how we can use it for new activations in Vegas and beyond.
This is such a cool event. Why does it only happen once a year? And why do you have to wait, 3 years between the times in which it appears in a specific region?
Yeah.
Especially since the other games, I think, have more consistent moments.
I mean, we've definitely talked about expanding the open. I could say there's all sorts of cost reasons. I think for us, we really want to make sure that we can rally the entire team around a big moment.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you're trying to replicate that across a lot, you make certain trade-offs. Maybe you start to make things less bespoke. And I think here we were able to really focus on what makes the Paris Open unique, what makes it really feel tied to set 16, and really make sure that's we're ultimately able to deliver an amazing experience for players this weekend.
Let's talk a little bit about Riftbound. So the regional qualifiers happened last week in Houston, which it feels like weeks and weeks ago now.
Yeah.
But just with all the international travel, but it's the first major event that has taken place in the West for Riftbound. I unfortunately was not there. I was running a Riftbound event elsewhere, but I've heard a lot about it from other folks. What is your assessment on sort of that first event and how it went?
I think first off, we learned a ton. I think that it was our first outing, and so we really were trying to figure out how are we building a Riftbound event. What do we want it to look like, be like? What do we want players to take away from the weekend? And so the weekend was primarily on learning and building up a lot of that capability. I think coming out of it, we feel like players had a really good time. We know that there's some feedback around kind of transition times and kind of how do we want to handle overtime? And I think we're talking a lot and having a good dialogue back and forth on what the right way to do that is. So I think for us, it was a huge success. Players seemed to have a lot of fun. I think the best of prizing was a huge excitement for the weekend, really showcased some of what differentiates Riftbound from other organized play events and TCG events. And just kind of being able to go after something that doesn't necessarily feel the most meta, or even just seeing how many of those best ofs make it into the top 64 was just so much fun.
I know that you reference this a lot of the conversation from folks that I talked to who often said they had a really good time, but so many of the rounds ran so long because of the way that at the end of Riftbound matches, there's a 5-turn situation. A lot of those folks said that was a big pain point. Do you think that is something that is happening because the game is new and so games are lasting longer as everyone's figuring out sort of the intricacies, or is that something that you feel like the game's been out long enough that you've been able to identify okay, yeah, this is just going to be core to the game, that if you have this 5-turn situation at the end, that's going to take so long?
I would say that we learned a ton seeing it. We definitely think that there's an element of the game is new and people are learning. We also have a ton of really good TCG players there, so I also think we walked away with it of let's not write it off totally to that.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going back and thinking about what should the overtime rule look like. Should we play longer, fewer turns, more kind of playing with all the different levers that we have? And I think we're early enough in the card game's history that it's better for us to be open to those types of changes and conversations than just assuming, well, it'll get better with time.
Yeah. Do you think players can expect some sort of change or adjustment before the next regional qualifiers, which I believe happen in about 2 months?
I don't know if I want to say that they can expect a change, but they can definitely expect that we've reviewed it and if we are, that we will have a perspective that would impact as early as Vegas and Bologna.
Okay.
So that may be that like, hey, we're going to hold it, but we're not evaluating for like the skip one from now.
You think people will hear any of those conversations between now and then?
I mean, I would assume those changes would be communicated.
Well,
if they
I'm
were
saying
the
if there were not changes, because you said
Oh.
it's the way that you worded it, I think my interpretation is that you're saying that there might not be changes in time.
I'm not saying that. I want to make it clear. It's not that like a time thing. I think
Yeah.
we will decide whether or not we think we should make changes, and we will do that with
Yeah.
Bologna and Vegas in mind. So I think the team's pretty open. I just don't want to commit to a direction
Sure,
right now.
that's fair.
Yeah.
For Riftbound, obviously it has a presence here at the event, which is really cool. I think there's about 4 different sealed events that are happening, kind of a smaller presence compared to obviously like a Houston or elsewhere. Do you anticipate bringing Riftbound to other esports events and having competitions alongside those other events?
I think we've definitely talked about it. The Paris Open is a unique opportunity where, given that it's in a convention center, it is much easier to bring in a footprint. It'd be hard to imagine a stadium where there was just rows of tables for you to play a Riftbound game for several hours while like the actual main event of an esports tournament's going on in like inside and you can't see it. So there's some like I think we're still figuring out what's the right way for Riftbound to show up at some of those events. But definitely we were thrilled to have Riftbound here this year. It was almost a no-brainer as soon as we got done with last year that we should do more with it.
You mentioned the best of pricing in Houston. One of the other things that I saw that was very popular, too popular, were the metal cards that were on the prize wall. That was, I think, a situation where I know you guys were able to pivot by day 3 on how to handle those, but should players expect those to be a mainstay at future events? Will the cards that were at the prize wall in Houston be available again later?
I think that we're figuring out exactly how we want to like take away learnings from the metal cards. It was definitely a new thing for us. And I definitely, obviously by the pivot on day 3, we realized that we should probably figure out a way to make this more equitable or not just a big craze. So I think we're still tuning it. But I'll say I did go straight from Houston straight to Paris.
Yes.
So we have not had a ton of time to really like just decide on what does this mean for going forward.
Well, that flight is about 12 hours long. You know, there's where you're not doing anything else. I figured you would be figuring it out there. You know? All right, so you have announced Vegas for next year.
Yeah.
What should fans expect for Vegas in 26 compared to where it was in 23?
I mean, I think that Vegas will hopefully take all the learnings that we've had now over 3 opens.
Yeah.
The sort of like your experience here, seeing it go from Vegas to Paris.
Yeah.
We want to bring that back to Vegas. So, we're definitely have our eyes on a much bigger venue where we can bring everything into one kind of location. And, I think continuing to invest in different formats and ways to play on site is going to be a big priority for us.
Very good. Last question. We kind of talked about this a little bit in Vegas all those years ago, but these events are so different than the major esports events that happen in terms of the scale is very different, but also for here, the sort of grassroots feel of it. It's certainly not grassroots in that, obviously Riot is putting it on, but like it does feel a lot like the older sort of esports vibes or even like convention vibes where you have like the artist alley and all that type of thing. Is that something that you hear from that you have conversations with your colleagues on the other games about? Like, does Riot, I think, look at this and say, what could we do in other spaces?
I think that I would be lying if the Open hasn't shown up in a conversation with just about every game.
Yeah.
I think not necessarily like, let's do an open bracket tournament, but definitely all of the, how can we bring in and make all of these things feel like one cohesive show? I think Valorant did this earlier this year with Masters Toronto. They had an artist alley, they were in a convention center, and it was sort of like one integrated hall.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of experimentation and playing with this across the Riot portfolio. I think a lot of the same people who are working on this will go on to work on League and Valorant from the events team. So it's great that we get all these reps and learnings in. Things that used to be a challenge for us, they've now come back to us as like, hey, we actually figured out how to do this on this other event. So it's great that we get to share those learnings across games.
Very good. Was there anything you would like to say to any of the TFT, Riftbound, 2XKO, or emerging esports titles that are out there? Any other fans?
No, I mean, I think whether you're a 2X player, a TFT player, or a Riftbound player, we've been talking a lot about what the competitive scene is going to look like now and next year for those games. It's kind of an exciting time, I think, whether it's Pro Circuit's launch and doing a full year of Pro Circuit next year, all the regional qualifiers we have coming up and regional championships for Riftbound next year, and then our recently introduced 2XKO competitive series. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on uniquely in each game right now.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you so much for the interview. For anybody who's watching this interview and saying, why didn't Travis ask Sherman about the product availability in Riftbound? I have a separate interview that will be either up on my Riftbound channel soon, or it might already be there with Changren and Dave, where I am grilling them on that, so you can go look for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for the interview. And for everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things TFT Paris Open, not TFT Open, TFT Paris Open, right here on my YouTube channel.